Did we imagine that now we'd have President Donald Trump and we might be on the verge of Prime Minister Jeremy Corbyn?
Well, everything's changing because there is an anger and discontent, and it's about the pace and the scale and the speed of change. And people feel insecure, and they're looking for someone to express their anger, their discontent, to articulate their grievances. So in America, they turn to Donald Trump. In France, they turn to someone completely different, Emmanuel Macron. In Britain, it's unclear what's going to happen, but clearly there's a lot of dissent. And the centre ground has actually folded. It's weak, and it's not able to answer the questions. And so people need to know, is my job going to be secure? What's the next job? How my kids are going to do? And people have got to answer these questions. And sometimes you feel when you read the newspapers, people are not even bothering to consider these important questions.
Is Jeremy Corbyn the right person to answer those questions?
Jeremy is a phenomenon. I keep saying, I mean...
Did you get him wrong, like so many people?
Obviously, I didn't expect him either to be leader of the Labour Party or to do so well in the election. I took us out of Iraq. You know, I became Prime Minister in 2007. We were out of Iraq by April 2009. And I told George Bush we were not going to put more troops in. We were coming out. I thought we'd become the occupiers and not the liberators. And we were out 3 years before the Americans. But I've had to look at that decision again.
Because you voted for the Iraq
Yes,
war,
of course.
Right? I mean, and in the book, you make it clear that you
I
thought
think we made a mistake.
Will you make it clear you don't think you got enough information?
No,
the Americans withheld information.
I think the Americans knew that he didn't have these weapons. Certainly in the Pentagon, they knew, and they didn't tell us. And, you know, Chilcot did a great inquiry, but he wasn't able to look at the American evidence because the Americans didn't really cooperate with his inquiry. And now when I look at the American evidence, they didn't worry that he didn't have weapons. They were going to go for him anyway.
They were into regime change.
They wanted the regime to change and Saddam out. We had to have a justification if we were ever going to take action, and they had information that I believe they didn't communicate.
Do you feel conned?
I feel misled. I think that's the best word. We were not just misinformed, we were misled by the Pentagon. And I feel the basis of our decision. You see, I talked to the MI6 at the time, and I'll be honest about it. They said, look, they almost knew the address and the place and the street where these weapons were. And when you get that level of intelligence, which you didn't have at the time, but we were getting that, you have to believe what they say.
Do you see
but
now...
afterwards, you find the Americans knew what we didn't know.
Do you see now a direct link between what happened then and the rise of Islamist fundamentalism and ISIS?
I think it's complicated, but right across the Middle East, you're right, Susanna. Iraq falling apart, which of course it has done. Syria with the civil war. Remember, the Israelis bombed Syria and stopped them having nuclear weapons when I was Prime Minister in 2007. People forget that, and it's quite relevant to North Korea. We stopped them having nuclear weapons, so thank God Syria doesn't have nuclear weapons. But you've got these religious tensions, but most of all, you've got millions of young people on the streets in these countries without jobs, without education.
And do you feel, in your heart, how do you feel about that, knowing that you voted for the action that has triggered that
I've said in the book very honestly that I've had to review these events, and I'm sorry for what happened, and I'm sorry that we were not able to protect our troops better. You know, I've always valued our service men and women and thought they've done a wonderful job, and we celebrated and commemorated that at the weekend. But if you make a wrong decision, well, you know, based on wrong information that we feel we should have had but weren't given, you've got to say sorry.
In the book, the other major decision that you had was the disintegration of the global financial markets. And I remember that all happening. You moved with unbelievable speed, actually. And you really, I think, in many ways, saved this country from a far worse financial fate. You don't get the credit for that I think you deserve. Is that frustrating to you?
Well, maybe, but you know, I felt I knew what to do, and the Americans were changing presidents, so they were in turmoil. The rest of Europe didn't think that they were going to be hit by it. Actually, they were further hit later on with the Euro crisis. And I felt I knew what to do, but I had to get the whole world together. So I had to get the Chinese. They thought it was an American problem. They had to come on board. The Brazilians, Latin America, Africa. So I went around the world and tried to pull them all together. And we had this massive meeting in London. We had this $1 trillion stimulus to the world economy, and it brought the world economy back. Undoubtedly, it brought the world economy back. And people who were worried about their savings, their homes, and their jobs were actually better off as a result of what we did.
You lost at an election.
I lost the election.
Yeah.
And you know the big issue at that meeting in the G20 when we had it in London is the issue of today. Where the greatest division was amongst world leaders was on tax havens. And Sarkozy threatened to walk out. He was the French president. The Chinese said they wouldn't have it in their communique, that we would deal with tax havens. And now we've got this huge issue today, the Panama Papers, the Paradise Paper. You know, a third of world
Do you
leaders
wish you'd
are
done more
identifying.
on tax havens when you were in a position to do it?